Hey YouTube, Revolution 2024 here, and I'm going to tell you about some things I do that piss the military off, because if you didn't figure out from my military spending video, I am in the military, which is why I know they spend all their money on office supplies. So, okay, it was more than a couple months ago. It was last November. I was at it was before that. It was the end of October, beginning of November of 2008. I'm in a commander's call. For those of you that don't know what this is where the big guy in charge of you comes and gives you lectures on what he wants you to do and what he likes and what he doesn't like. It's really boring and most people sleep through it. So we're in this commander's call and I'm up towards the front. I'm in like the third row back. They're giving a briefing on smoking. 90% of the people, I don't know if that's a real statistic, but like 90% of the people, a shitload of the people in the military smoke. So none of them are paying attention to this. I pay very close attention to the briefings, as you will see, and this tends to get me in trouble because I pick apart their briefings. They're giving a briefing on smoking. Now I'm reading ahead, everyone else is sleeping. I'm reading ahead. I get to the last line of the slide where it says the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I can't believe they're actually going to say it. I'm like, maybe it's a typo. Maybe they didn't mean to say that. They're not going to say that. Sure enough, they get to the end of the slide and they say, 50% of all people whose parents smoked are likely to smoke. Any questions? I look around, dumbfounded by the fact that nobody else caught this, and I raised my hand. And they get really excited whenever you raise your hand to ask a question because nobody ever asks any questions. This guy does. I raise my hand. And they say, yeah, what's your question? I was like, doesn't everybody have a 50% chance of smoking regardless of whether or not your parents smoked or not? It's a choice. It's either something you're going to do or not going to do. Jaws hit the floor. People actually started paying attention at this point because they couldn't believe that I actually called this out during their big guy's little miniature person's briefing that he had set up. The rest of the briefing, they made reference to this about, 50% this or 50% that. They were laughing about it. The commander calls me up at the end. He has this spiel he gives at the end where, who can tell me the 4 things I lecture about every time? So he calls me up because I'm obviously the man of the hour, has me answer him. I get his coin, which is somewhat of it's an honor in the military to get an officer's coin. So I get his coin and everyone's pissed at me because I got his coin for being a smartass. They say, you shouldn't have got that because you were just being smartass. I was like, no, actually I was just pointing out a mistake and treating the officer. People think you have to kiss an officer's ass in the military. I was treating the officer like a human being because this shit that you wear right here doesn't mean anything to me. Because before you're this or this, you're a human being, and that's what I'm going to treat you like. Fast forward to yesterday. I'm in another briefing. This time it's a sexual assault briefing. That's fun. So I'm in this briefing, and yet again, everybody's sleeping. I, again, am paying very close attention to everything this guy says. Everything. I don't pick apart. I don't raise my hand on certain things I see. Like, during one part in the briefing, he said, pay close attention to the words that are highlighted in red. And the words weren't actually highlighted at all. They were just a different color, so he was wrong there. But I didn't say anything about that. I just let it slip. Meanwhile, there's a lieutenant behind me talking during the briefing. Not paying attention, talking. Rather than sleeping, he chooses to talk. Another form of not paying attention. Anyways, the first scenario, they point to this guy and they say that a 25-year-old girl has been raped and yada yada yada. What do you do in this situation? Remember, this is a sexual assault prevention briefing. This guy, not paying attention, is retarded to the fact that he's even being called on. He's like, and a lot of people in the military are full of testosterone, so this guy turns around and he's like, well, I've never had a girl tell me no, so I don't know what I would do in this situation. He kind of reminded me of the lead character of Grease, I think his name was Danny Zuko, right? That's what this guy reminded me of whenever he said this. I myself found it very inappropriate for the time, or the type of briefing we were in. It probably wasn't something that should have been said, but I didn't say anything about it. And actually everybody else in the room laughed with him. Fast forward a couple minutes, not too many, but the guy giving the briefing decides to tell a story about how the mayor of Minnesota or Michigan jumped in to save these people from getting mugged. And if you caught what I just said, you'll see why I got in trouble. He says, the mayor of Minnesota or Michigan. I look around and everybody's sleeping, so I raise my hand. He's like, yeah, he gets all excited just like the other person is. He's like, yeah, what do you got? And I was like, as both Michigan and Minnesota are states, neither of them have mayors, they have governors. The individual cities within the state have mayors, but the state themselves, they do not have mayors. At this point, the lieutenant sitting behind me that's been talking decides to pay attention to what I said. He also decides to get pissed off at what I said. Does something very unprofessional and very out of what he is supposed to be. Lieutenant is an officer. Officers are supposed to be leaders. They're not supposed to say, hey, dumbass, shut your mouth. I found that very inappropriate. Wasn't allowed to say anything. But meanwhile, I'm stewing in my head, like, I'm just plotting, because I know this lieutenant, and I know he's going to come up to me and say something as soon as he gets the chance. So I'm like plotting, I'm like, well, you've been talking the entire time, and that guy said that, and that was inappropriate, and you're going to get on to me for paying attention. You're going to, like, get pissed off because I paid attention and pointed out the mistake. No, you're not. So I'm ready. I'm ready to go off on this lieutenant, which is something you're not supposed to do. You do not backmouth an officer. I am plotting, I am ready to. Meanwhile, there's a staff sergeant next to me that I know. He tells me at the end of the briefing, he says, don't go anywhere until I do, because I know he's going to come over here and say something, and I have your back. Pretty much what he said. Something like that. He had my back in the long run. The lieutenant charges me as soon as the briefing's up. As soon as he can get up, he's over there. You go apologize to him right now. So I'm like, peace. I'm over there. I'm apologizing to the guy. Meanwhile, the staff sergeant's talking to the lieutenant, explaining to him how whenever a lieutenant sees a staff sergeant sitting next to an airman, he should let the staff sergeant deal with it and not the lieutenant. So I go over there and I walk up to the guy giving the briefing, wait for everyone to clear out, and explain to him that I have been forced to come up and apologize to this man for my comment during the briefing. This disturbs the guy giving the briefing. He says, who told you to come up and apologize to me? I was like, I'm just going to say it was a lieutenant and leave it at that, because I am in enough trouble as it is. He's like, who was it? I'll go kick their ass. I'd rather you didn't. I'm just going to leave it at I'm in trouble. He's like, is it him? I turn around. This lieutenant is 10 feet behind me, glaring a hole in the back of my head. And I'm like, yeah. So we'll just let you know it was him, and in the future, I'll just calm down. I probably won't, but I'll let them believe that. I go back to where I work, and I tell my upper management that they're going to be getting a phone call from this lieutenant, because there was a major in the room, a chief, which is the highest enlisted rank you can be in the Air Force. There's a major, a chief, first sergeant, which he has a significant role also, and this lieutenant, who are all pissed at me. And the lieutenant is probably going to be calling them. And I explained the story to them, and one of my upper management people tells me that the lieutenant isn't going to call. Why not? Here he agrees with me. He says, first off, the lieutenant called you a dumbass during the briefing, and that is very unprofessional and un-officer-like, and he's not going to own up to that. Second off, he isn't going to call to say that an airman made a correction during a briefing, because that is an embarrassment to him. So, moral of the story here, I need to keep my mouth shut. I'm not going to, but we'll see what happens in the future, and hopefully I'll have more stories for you. Peace!